A very good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the Trisector Forum 2017, organized by the Singapore Management University School of Social Sciences. This year's forum will anchor on partnerships for sustainable development. My name is Karen Lee, and I'm a graduating student from the third cohort of the Master of Trisector Collaboration Program, otherwise known as MTSC, and I'm delighted to be your MC this morning. It is clear that in today's world, growth and development are not the same. As societies and organizations enhance their abilities to gather more resources, often beyond what they need, sustainability has become a mainstream consideration. Not merely in terms of sustainability for operating and financial models, but also sustainability in terms of our shared natural, social, and human capital. This morning, the Trisector Forum will showcase how innovative cross-sector partnerships can tackle big and complex challenges and help to meet the world's goals through action on the ground here in Asia. Olam International is a leader in setting new standards for sustainability and responsible practices in agribusiness. I look forward to hearing from our keynote speaker today, Mr. Sunny Verghese, also co-founder and group CEO of Olam International, and also a member of the Business and Sustainable Development Commission, on how businesses are working with cross-sector partners in new ways and taking on new responsibilities that used to be considered solely the responsibilities of states and NGOs. This will be followed by a highly anticipated panel discussion with Mr. Sunny Verghese, Ms. Melissa Kui, Chief Executive Officer of the National Volunteer and Philanthropy Centre Singapore, as well as our MTSC Academic Director, Professor Anne Florini. We'll glean insights from the panel on how cross-sector partnerships can accelerate the progress of achieving the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, which is a universal call to action to end poverty, protect the planet, as well as to ensure that all people enjoy equitable and inclusive participation in their societies. Last but not least, in today's plenary session, our graduating cohort of the Master of the Trisector Collaboration Program will present brief highlights of their proposals for effective partnerships in key areas of food, energy, and social inclusion. You will then have a choice after a short coffee break to explore any one of these topics more deeply in their respective in-depth breakout sessions. Now, I'm excited to share that these sessions have been specifically designed very differently from your regular university workshops, so I shall not give it away, and you will have to discover it for yourself. Without further ado, we'll now like to invite up on stage Mr. Srivan Naidu, Director of Program Development and Partnerships, Singapore Management University School of Social Sciences, to deliver the welcome address. Mr. Naidu, please.
Good morning, everyone. A very good morning to Mr. Sunny Verghese, co-founder and group CEO of Olam International and chairman of the Human Capital Leadership Institute, Professor Jerry George, Dean of the Lee Kong Chian School of Business, Ms. Melissa Kui, CEO, National Volunteer and Philanthropy Centre, Mr. Peter Noboa from DSM, SMU colleagues, friends, partners, students, and alumni of the Masters in Trisector Collaboration. On behalf of everybody from the team at the Masters of Trisector Collaboration Program at SMU's School of Social Sciences, I'd like to thank you for making time today to join us, to learn about our work, and to hear the progress our graduating students have made on issues of food security, access to renewable energy, and social inclusion for ex-offenders, all using the approach of cross-sector collaboration. Today's forum is the third in our annual series since the Master of Trisector Collaboration, or the MTSC, was initiated by my colleague, Anne Florini. The program is the first, and to the best of my knowledge, still the only master's level degree program that equips mid-career professionals as code-switching emissaries who are fluent in the language of the various sectors and so can build bridges between them. These sectors are often categorized as the government, business, and civil society sectors. But business strategy guru Henry Mintzberg prefers to call the third sector the plural sector because of the immense variety within the sector that is neither government nor for profit. But more significant than any difference in the terminologies is the fact that one of the leading experts in strategic planning of the last few decades has shifted his attention to the interaction between the various sectors that help keep society running. Mintzberg published his manuscript titled Rebalancing Society in 2014. The MTSC had been launched 1 year before that. This year, the School of Social Sciences celebrates not the far-sightedness of the MTSC, but its 10th anniversary. My dean, Professor James Tang, is overseas and couldn't join us today, but he conveys his gratitude for your presence and wishes all of you an enjoyable and enriching forum. It's almost time for me to shut up and let Mr. Sunny Verghese deliver his keynote speech, but before that, Dean Jerry George would like to say a few words. Jerry?
On behalf of Dean James Tang, welcome. It's always a pleasure to talk to an audience that tries to make a difference in this world, right? And over the past 5 or 6 years, I've been working with different multilateral bodies, with the UN, WHO, on HIV in different parts of the world, with the UK's DFID on rural electrification in Africa. And now I'm starting to think about natural resources for the past few years, along with some of my colleagues in the business school. But when you think about the research, apart from being dean, I used to be smart. I used to be the editor of the Academy of Management Journal, which is our top field journal in management. So the Academy of Management has about 19,000 members who are professors in different parts of the world. And so to guide the whole field to change takes a lot of thinking and effort in trying to coordinate different pieces. But somehow you start taking nuggets of wisdom by trying to cajole, coerce, bring people together. And I have 3 simple thoughts. I have only 3 because Srivan told me just like 10 minutes ago that I'm giving this opening remarks, right? So the first one, I think, is about a lot of us, especially in Trisector, have a lot of passion to make a difference. But I don't think passion alone is enough. It's the galvanizing passion to action that makes a difference. So the first one I would think about is how do we, when we think about solving what we call grand challenges, think about galvanizing passion into action. The second piece, whenever we talk about collaboration, we have to think about the benefits of collaboration exceeding the costs of coordination. So when you put together various alliances to make a difference in this world, each party has their own costs when they think about this. Should I be investing in something? Will they take away my ideas? And so forth. So the costs of coordination and working with others, even if it's competitors or partners, there is a cost associated with that. So somehow the benefits of that collaboration has to far exceed the costs of coordination. And the third piece is very simple. We're here to create value in society. But that's not always, it may be easy to create value. It's not that easy, but it may be easy. But human intentions are always that we want to capture a lot of that value. Sometimes the value we capture exceeds the value we create. And that happens in many sectors. So the third insight that I would have is to make sure that the value we capture should always be less than the value we create. Otherwise, we don't leave any value for society on the table. So that's it in terms of remarks. I want us to think about these three simple issues: galvanizing passion into action, making sure that the benefits of collaboration far exceed the costs of coordination, and third would be making sure that when we are making a difference, that we leave things on the table, we leave value on the table so that society benefits. I've participated in Sunny's management discussions where he's very passionately tries to encourage his staff members to step out of their roles, to think broader and to think greater. So he clearly has a lot more to say than I have in this topic. But to start us in that conversation, I want us to think about these three issues as a trisector, as something that underpins trisector collaboration. And to welcome Sunny Verghese to the stage to have his, should I say that or you're supposed to say? You're supposed to say, let her do her job. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Prof. George. And now we'd like to invite Mr. Sunny Verghese up on stage to deliver the keynote address. Mr. Verghese, please.
Thank you, Stephen. Thank you, Jerry. And congratulations, Anne, and to her team for the 10th anniversary. I think it's a remarkable and outstanding achievement. I'm delighted to be here this morning, and I've been asked to speak on partnerships for sustainable development. And I thought I'll do 5 things today. First, very briefly introduce OLAM to those in the audience who might not be familiar with our name, but very briefly. Secondly, I'd like to make a case for sustainability. I don't think for this audience that is really necessary, but I just want to articulate a point of view in terms of the case for sustainability and why it should be at the heart of our business. Thirdly, I'd like to look at 4 lenses in the way we can understand sustainability and how we do it at OLAM using those 4 lenses. And fourthly, I'd like to get into the weeds about this debate on purpose versus profits. And I think every 50 to 70 years, the way businesses are organized, led, managed, financed keeps changing. The last 50 to 70 years was the primacy of the shareholder model, brought in significant benefits in improving the efficiency of capital allocation and the disciplines of capital allocation, but that had some side impacts and effects as well. And the world is now swinging to a new era of purpose-driven businesses and models. I believe that there is a third way of doing both at the same time, being value or profit maximizers and purpose maximizers at the same time. I don't see it as an either-or debate. I see it as being able to achieve both at the same time concurrently. So we will get a little bit into that. And finally, I'll talk about partnerships, because at the end of the day, if you want to really change the world, which is what Professor Jerry just alluded to, that we want to live a better world for our future generations. And if you want to do that, it's not possible to do it either individually or at the firm level alone. While both are extremely important first 2 steps, we need to get whole sectors galvanized to attack the big problems, as Jerry would call it, grand challenges, what I would call meta issues. And I think there are 5 meta systems in the world, one of which is food and agriculture, which I'm concerned with primarily. But whether it is energy or whether it's urban mobility and cities, they're all part of the 5 meta systems. So we need to change and fundamentally transform those big meta systems to change our world for the better. So I'll talk a little bit about one initiative with regard to one meta system, is the food and agricultural system, in terms of creating a sectoral alliance, a global sectoral alliance that we call GAA, Global Agribusiness Alliance. So I'll just walk you through that as well. So very briefly, getting on to the first part, which is really introducing OLAM. We are today a leading global agribusiness. We operate from farm to fork or farm to plate. We operate in 70 countries around the world. We deal in about 47 agricultural raw materials and food ingredients that we supply to over 22,000 customers worldwide. We have about 69,500 employees in these countries, and we are a relatively young company. We had a very modest beginning. We started 27 years ago, and that is relevant in our industry because it's a very, very old industry. Sumitomo is 414 years old, and ADM is 100 years old. Cargill is celebrating its 150th anniversary. Bunge is 197 years old. median of man is 245 years old. So at 27, we are still a toddler, a babe in the woods, but we have grown quite significantly, well above market growth rates in the past, and that is largely on account of the fact that we have differentiated our business. And the mantra in Olam is first differentiate before you scale. We don't allow any of our businesses to grow till they have clearly established some distinct points of differentiation. And after that, growth becomes a little bit more routine and reflexive. It might take 5 years to establish a point of differentiation. It might take us 10 years to establish a point of differentiation, but you have no right to grow till you've clearly created a differentiation. And the oxymoron for us is that we're in a commodity business. We offer standardized commodity products with standardized attributes. So how do you differentiate a commodity business? And we have achieved really 3 main points of differentiation. One is at the grower end, the supplier end. We out-origin our competition by going and buying directly from the farm gate, from smallholder farmers. So we have 4.33 million farmers in our supply network with whom we buy directly. So most of our competitors go into the producing countries and buy secondhand at the port city. And therefore, we are able to out-origin our competition. And 2/3 of the profit pool is domiciled between that farm gate point and the port city point. So that's the first point of differentiation at the grower end, at the farmer end. Then at the customer end, we differentiate ourselves that in addition to supplying the various raw materials that we deliver, whether it's cocoa or coffee, we offer various value-added solutions and services. So we offer organically certified raw materials, we offer traceability guarantees, we offer risk management solutions, we offer vendor-managed inventory solutions. So we offer many value-added solutions and services that allows us to get some kind of pricing power, gives us a larger share of a customer's wallet, creates some stickiness with our customer. Because in this business, we're all price takers. My customer and me, we're all price takers because commodity markets have a transparent price discovery mechanism. So Nestle cannot tell me he's the world's largest coffee roaster, and for that privilege, I must give him a 10% discount. I can't say I'm the world's largest green coffee supplier, which we are, and for that distinction, we should get a premium. We're all price takers. The only way to get any kind of pricing power in our industry, the commodity business, is to then differentiate and provide these solutions and services which are scarce in value. And the last way we have differentiated ourselves, and in the ultimate analysis, the most important differentiation is really about creating an organizational advantage. Getting people who are, as Jerry just mentioned, passionate, and then galvanizing that passion into action, as he said, as one of his insights. That I think we have done quite well over the last 27 years, and which today, amongst all the points of differentiation that I mentioned, gives me the greatest confidence that if we continue sustaining that organizational advantage, we will succeed going forward as well. Oh, sorry. Okay. All right, so let's just go to the case for sustainability, why sustainability should be at the heart of every business. And all of these issues that I'm going to be talking about, all of you have already thought about. I'm not going to be offering you any insight that you haven't already heard. But I just want to marshal and organize them into what I would like to call defensive reasons why sustainability should be heart of your business, but also more offensive reasons why sustainability should be at the heart of your business. So clearly, firstly, if you're not a sustainable business, you will not have a license to operate. We operate, as I told you, in 70 countries. Most of the host governments in these countries are very keen to attract foreign direct investment to come in and make those commitments in those countries, and therefore we are really given a red carpet to come and make those investments, and particularly in agriculture, because agriculture is very job creating. If you put a technology semiconductor plant in those countries, it doesn't generate much jobs. So we employ 69,800 people, largely because agriculture, there's a lot of jobs that are created. So these governments are very keen on you to come and invest. But getting a license from the communities where you're investing in a plantation project or some other agribusiness project is very, very difficult, because the communities are typically suspicious of foreign investors. They believe they're coming there to exploit their resources. And even if the government has given you a license to come and invest, they will not give you the license to invest unless they feel that you're transforming the livelihoods, including them in an ecosystem, and that there is a real value of you coming there and making those investments. So one of the reasons why companies like us would consider being more sustainable would be to secure a license to operate from the communities in the context in which we are making those investments. Secondly, it's clearly risk mitigation. In December of this year, we were attacked by an NGO called Mighty Earth, which is an NGO set up by Waxman Strategies. Waxman is just a recently retired Democratic congressman, and he has an NGO called Mighty Earth. They attacked us for deforestation in Gabon in our palm and rubber plantations. And I'll talk about that a little bit more later in terms of what were the main reasons of their attack on Olam, what was our response, what did we actually do. So I'll come to that later in my presentation. But this is a good example that your whole business could be at stake. And therefore, if you don't manage those risks, you could go out of business. So many companies look at sustainability and wanting to become more sustainable because they want to mitigate that risk so that they can continue to operate. The third is obviously we want to protect and accrete reputational capital. Over the course of the last 27 years, we have won many awards for innovative business models. But the one my team has been most proud of is the award that we won last year to be included in Fortune's top 50 companies, what they call Change the World list. And we were 23 in that list, and DSM is another one of those companies in that list as the 50 companies in the world which are changing the world. And many of the familiar names that you might have heard of in the internet world are not featured in that list. Some are, but not many of them which are well known. And we were the only company in our industry to be featured in that list. And of all the awards that we have won, the team is proudest of this achievement, this award. So protecting and accreting reputational capital, which you can draw down in a crisis. So December, the attack, Mighty Earth attack on Olam, we could draw down on all the goodwill and all the reputation that we had built of being ahead of the curve in terms of sustainability, and that protected us against that attack. And I'll come back to that later when I talk about that case. But a little bit more offensively, companies want to be sustainable because they believe it will be a competitive differentiator. And I'll talk about a little bit about that later. So at Olam, one of the disruptive things that we are now doing is saying to our customers that if you buy anything from us, a cocoa, coffee, or edible nuts, there is like Intel inside, Olam inside, which means we have the Olam sustainability chip embedded there. And we mean by that the social capital and the natural capital that we have created in delivering those ingredients and raw materials to you. So that for us is an example of where we think it will be a competitive differentiator. So if you asked many of you in this room who have worked for companies or organizations and ask you what the revenues of those companies were or what the profits of those companies were or how many employees they had, I'm sure most of you will be able to give us a ready answer. But if I asked you what was your company's carbon footprint, how much carbon dioxide did they emit? What is their water footprint? How much water did they emit? How much waste did they emit? Just 3 examples of 3 elements of natural capital. I would wager a bet that probably 99% of you wouldn't know, right? So most of our customers don't know, and most of our customers want their suppliers to tell them that this ton of cocoa beans that they bought from us has got what kind of carbon footprint, what kind of water footprint, what kind of waste footprint, how many farmers did we impact, how many livelihoods did we change. Now, we are embedding something in our offerings to our customers that will give them a transparent footprint. Which farmers did we buy from, what all of these footprints are, and done through CDP reporting, Carbon Disclosure Project reporting, and GRI reporting, which is verifiable and auditable. And therefore, it can be a competitive differentiator. Clearly, the current generation of talent are not willing to work for a company just because they're making some money or selling more soap or shampoo or whatever else they're supposed to do in that company. They want meaning to the work that they're doing. Because if they're going to spend a third or half their waking lives in a company, they want to know it's worth their while. And there is some purpose and meaning in what they're doing. So we can't attract next generation talent just by saying you're a great company, you have a great strategy, you know how to win, if they don't find some meaning in the work that they're going to be doing. And then most importantly for me, it's a clear business case. And one of the reasons why sustainability is seen more as public relations brownie point scoring objective is because shareholders and boards don't feel that it is their cause. They're saying the business of business, as Milton Friedman said, is business. There are other organizations created by society to meet the other requirements. right? But businesses should focus on business. The moment they stray down in these areas, it's a slippery slope. So if you want to really change sustainability sensibilities, you have to start with shareholders and board, because they are overseeing management. So even if management wants to do something, if shareholders and board believe that it is not right or it's not the right thing by the shareholder, they're not going to be adopting it. And therefore, we have to make a clear business case. Our governing objective at Olam, in terms of why we are in business, is to maximize long-term intrinsic value for our continuing owners. But we are saying our purpose is to reimagine global agriculture and growing responsibly. And we have shown our board and our shareholders a direct link between achieving our purpose and maximizing our long-term continuing value for our long-term intrinsic value for our continuing owners. Because to create long-term intrinsic value, not short-term profits, not share price, not top line, not bottom line, but long-term intrinsic value, you have to do three things. You have to open up capital spreads between your return on equity, cost of equity, between return on invested capital, weighted average cost of capital. And for that, you have to be really creative and innovative in the way you get the maximum possible impact from the fewest possible resources. Second, you have to increase the rate of profitable growth, which means you have to be differentiated to increase your rate of profitable growth. And third, you have to sustain that growth over a period of time, all extremely difficult things to do. And having a purpose and embedding sustainability allows you to impact all of these three value drivers directly. And I'll show you a quick example later in the presentation. And that is what convinced my shareholders and my board. Otherwise, they were saying that as a management team, you have no right to usurp my prerogative to give to the cause that is dear to me. My mother died of cancer. I want to give to cancer. I don't want you as a CEO giving to a sports event or a musical event or an exhibition or something else because you are passionate about it, right? But if you tell your shareholders and your board that all these things that you're doing is directly going to impact long-term value for continuing owners, there is no conflict. And they want you to do more of that. And that is what I think we need to do. But above and beyond all of this, I'm 57 years old. Until I was 45, I had no clue about sustainability or what it meant and how it was important, right? It's only in the last 12 years that my sensibilities have changed. And whenever I go to conferences of this kind, and it's filled with plural society and NGOs and people, they always look at everybody else outside that room and say they don't get it. Yeah, you get it because you have been blessed with the environmental intelligence gene. In the multiple intelligence theory, Howard Gardner, the clinical psychologist at Harvard Medical School, has now discovered 8 intelligences. One of those 8 intelligences is environmental intelligence. So some of you are born with environmental intelligence and you can appreciate and you have the sensibility for it. For everybody else, it has to be cultivated. So you cannot be arrogant just because you're blessed with a gene or that intelligence that you get it, others don't get it. I didn't get it. I don't have that environmental intelligence. My road to Damascus moment was my kids. My kids, this generation, thank God for that. They party hard, play hard, but their sensibility on the environment and sustainability is far different than my generation's. And they opened the light for me in terms of understanding what is the point of all this overwhelming effort, working 7 days a week, 24 hours a day kind of effort, if it's not going to leave the world a better place. Right? So for me, the most important reason why we should have sustainability at the heart of business, all of the other 6 that I gave you is rational explanations for the rational people in this room. But really, at the end of the day, we have to be sustainable because it's the right thing to do. The average age of a company is 12 years old. The longest living company known is 1,000 years old. Why can't all of us be 1,000-year-old successful, prospering companies? So if you want to be enduring and everlasting, and that's the word, that's the meaning of the word Olam, enduring, everlasting. So if you want to build a company that lasts for a very, very long period of time and prospers and succeeds, we have to have sustainability at the heart of our business. Okay, so I want to move on to the various lenses for understanding sustainability, and this is not a comprehensive lens. Instead of 4, I could say 6, but I'm just talking about how we look at it in Olam using these 4 lenses. So the first lens for us is really planetary boundaries. We are in food and agriculture, and food and agriculture accounts for 25% of the greenhouse gas emissions, for example, right? So we have to look at sustainability issues within our sector, firstly from the lens of scientific evidence. So I keep saying sustainability is not a religion, it's not an ideology. It is science, right? So we shouldn't make it an ideology, we shouldn't make it a religion, it is science. So a group of Earth scientists spent 60 years coming up with these precautionary planetary boundaries for human-driven anthropogenic man-made climate change impacts. And they said that, and they measured these 9 boundaries and said that if you exceed these boundaries, then you're going to potentially cause a major disruption in climate. And that will directly impact world economies and livelihoods and everything else, right? There are only 9, there is not 10, there is not 8. Out of these 9, they've quantified 7. And they are still unable to quantify 2, which they're working on at this point in time. So we will look at what these planetary boundaries are and how did that inform our judgment on what kind of sustainability orientation we need to have. The second lens that we have used is the lens of the major developmental challenges that confront us this century. And we feel there are 6 major developmental challenges. And we look at developing sustainability strategies informed by what we see as the major developmental challenges that confront all of us this century. So that's the second lens that we have used. The third is the UN Sustainable Development Goals. In 2015, this was a miracle that happened when 196 countries got together and agreed on 17 sustainable developmental goals and 169 targets. Just imagine 196 countries coming together to agree on any one target. They agreed on 17 goals and 169 targets. And by 2030, 15 years from when they came up with this, they said, this is the kind of world and future that we want to build. And 196 countries have agreed to this. So that is another framework in terms of informing our judgment of what we should do in terms of sustainability. Because I think the point that Jerry made earlier this morning is very important. How do you convert passion into action? And these, the UN SDGs for me allows you to do that. And finally, it is about your business model. If sustainability is only about scoring public relations brownie points, that you inventorize all the good deeds that you did during the year, all the giving you made during that year, it's not going to work. And if it is an afterthought, it's not going to work. So how do you make it organic and integral to your business model? You can't operate your business model without thinking about sustainability. So how do you integrate it in your business model? So those are the 4 lenses that I'll be talking about. Let's start with the planetary boundaries. What are the 9 planetary boundaries? First, obviously, as all of us know, is climate change. This boundary condition is that you cannot have more than 350 parts per million carbon dioxide concentrations in the atmosphere. If you want to maintain world growth in temperatures to below 2 degrees centigrade by 2100. Since the pre-industrial era to now, global temperatures have grown only 0.7 degrees centigrade. And that has already resulted in the number of frequency and seriousness of extreme weather events dramatically growing. So in the 1980s, the Cambridge Attribution Science Center has established that there were 300 extreme weather events. In 2015, there was 1,000 extreme weather events, resulting from greenhouse gas emissions and the impact of that on climate change. So the second miracle that occurred in 2016 was 194 countries signed the Paris Climate Accord and committed to changing carbon emissions and greenhouse gas emissions so that they will be able to limit temperature growth to under 2 degrees centigrade by 2100 and preferably to below 1.5 degrees centigrade. 1.5 degrees centigrade still double the temperature increases that we have experienced so far and could still cause massive havoc to global weather. Today, annually, we generate about 40 gigatons of carbon dioxide, our current ways we consume and live. And according to the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, their projections are that if we continue on the current trajectory, we will emit 175 gigatons of carbon dioxide by 2100. That will mean that world temperatures will rise by 4.5 to 5 degrees centigrade. That would be a meltdown scenario. But even if you go to the next scenario, which is what we have agreed in Paris in the Climate Accord Agreement and commitments that what they call the nationally determined contributions and commitments that each country has made, and that is why the Singapore government has this year levied a carbon tax. Because they're saying, while it is not legally enforceable, the commitments that all these 194 countries made in the Climate Accord Agreement, Singapore intends to keep its commitment. And if Singapore intends to keep its commitment, we have to change the behavior of Singaporeans and Singapore companies in the way they emit greenhouse gases. If something is free, we are going to indiscriminately use it. If carbon is free, or water is free, or electricity is free, we are going to indiscriminately use it. But if something is going to be priced, you're going to change your behavior. So Singapore has belled the cat and introduced the carbon tax, increased water tariffs by 30%, definitely a vote-losing move. But they've had the confidence and courage to do it. And I think they will set the standard for other countries to follow. So climate change is a big deal. Even if you meet the Paris Accord agreements, global temperatures will rise by 3.5 degrees centigrade. The only way we can meet the objective of limiting growth in global temperatures to under 2 degrees centigrade is if by 2100 we have 0 net emissions, which means we have to decarbonize the world, which means we have to dramatically change our lifestyles and the way we live and consume if you have to achieve that goal. Yeah? Okay, second is precautionary boundary condition is the rate of biodiversity loss. The boundary condition is you should not lose more than 10 species per million species every year. This is the boundary condition. And the actuals are, today we are losing 1,000 species per million species every year. So we are exceeding this boundary target by 100-fold, not just marginally, by 100-fold. 70% of all the world wildlife has gone extinct in the last 100 years. Every tiny creature, plant and flora and fauna has a role in regulating climate, atmosphere, air quality, and everything else. We are in plantations. One of the plantations that we are in is almond plantations. Now, almond plantations need bees to cross-pollinate those plants. These bees are very tough and finicky animals. Tiny creatures, but they will only fly from 9 a.m. to 2 p.m. I can't give them overtime and get them to fly more. They will not fly if the wind speeds are about 25 kilometers an hour. They will not fly if the temperatures are below 15 degrees centigrade. I need 3 beehives for every acre of almond plantations. I buy 6 billion bees a year. Have you heard of bees issuing you an invoice? They issued me an invoice of $18 million last year. I had to pay $18 million to buy those bees. And then you have this climate change impacts and varroa mite infestation and bee population just disappearing. Right? Every tiny insect has a role in balancing the ecosystem, regulating climate, air quality, and many other things. Right? And if that changes, life changes. And we are already exceeding that boundary. Third is the nitrogen and phosphate loading. Today, because we want to increase productivity, for example, if you take China, they apply 500 kilograms of fertilizer per hectare. In Europe, the largest user of fertilizer is Germany, 138 kilograms of fertilizer per hectare, against China's 500. The US applies about 110. Africa is 14 and 15 kgs per hectare. India is about 40 kgs per hectare. China applies 500 kgs per hectare. Because they got low land holdings, they want to maximize productivity, they have a policy of being self-sufficient. At least 95% of the food they consume, they want to produce it themselves. And as a result, they have very intensive agriculture. And the WHO now estimates that 97% of all China's surface water, lakes and rivers, are polluted in terms of the threshold biological oxygen demand measure that they use to determine pollution. They're all polluted as a result of that. Now, the boundary condition here is you cannot apply more than 6.2 million tons of phosphates into the soil each year. We are currently applying 15 million tons and rising. In terms of nitrogen, the boundary condition is you cannot apply more than 62 million tons of nitrogen a year. We are now applying 160 million tons and rising. So this is the third boundary condition that we have already breached and gone above. The fourth is land use change. As I said, 25% of greenhouse gas emissions is agriculture. About 13% of that is because of land use change, converting forests into agriculture and planting crops to meet the growing demands for food. So land use change is a big source of greenhouse gas emissions. Ocean acidification, 93% of all the greenhouse gases that we are emitting. You know, the greenhouse gases that we are emitting is 110 million tons of greenhouse gases every day, 365 days of the year. That is equivalent to exploding 400 Hiroshima-class atomic bombs. 400 Hiroshima-class atomic bombs every day of the year, 365 days of the year. That is the kind of energy that is going to be trapped in all of the greenhouse gas emissions that we are making, to give you a sense of what we are doing to the planet and to the, and all of the 93% of all of that is trapped in the oceans, leading to ocean acidification. According to the Earth scientists, they say that this rate of ocean acidification has not transpired in 65 million years. Right? So this is pretty remarkable, the rate at which ocean acidification is taking place. Global freshwater use. We use 4.9 trillion cubic meters of water today. 71% of that goes into agriculture. About roughly 22% is for industrial use, and the rest is household consumption. If I ask any of you in this room, how much water do you drink, you might say 1 or 2 liters. But the UN says that you need 55 liters of water a day for every individual for his bathing and other personal purposes. But in Singapore, you consume a minimum of 3,600 plus 55 plus 1 or 2 liters that you drink, because you consume 3,600 calories of food per capita in Singapore as the average consumption of calories. To produce a calorie of food, I need 1 liter of water. So to produce a kg of chicken or poultry meat, I need 6,000 liters of water. A kg of pork meat, I need 10,000 liters of water. And a kg of beef meat, I need 17,000 liters of water. If you guys had breakfast today, two fried eggs sunny side up, it was 135 liters of water that you consumed. If you had a cup of coffee, it was about 120 liters of water. If you had a brown toast, it was about 12 liters of water. A roasted tomato was about 14, 15 liters of water. Right? A glass of wine last night, if you had over your dinner, is 200 liters of water. And I'm not making these numbers up. Those of you who want validation on all of these numbers, we do this work. This is what we do for a living. Right? So your breakfast on an average in Singapore would have meant that you consumed 1,600 liters, 1,500 liters of water. So our population is growing 75 million a year, more mouths to feed. By 2050, we'll be about 9.5 billion population. There's going to be more demand for water. We are fighting war over oil. We'll fight bigger wars over water and food. Right? Chemical pollution, this is one of the 2 boundary conditions that they've not been able to quantify, because there are various kinds of chemical pollutants and effluents that our businesses and activities generate. And it's difficult to get an aggregate measure of it. So they're still working on developing a boundary condition for chemical pollution. This is the good news, ozone depletion. 20 years ago, this was a big, big issue, right? And the boundary condition here is that the ozone layer thickness should be at least 284 Dobson units when you measure the thickness of the ozone layer. 275. We are at 284 today. So we are really reversed the hole in the ozone layer that we were developing by the way we emitted. And that gives me confidence that we can reverse the trend in the other planetary boundary conditions. If we have done that in ozone and we sustain that, then we can do it in the other stuff as well. Atmospheric aerosol loading versus nitrates or sulfates and other particulate matter that hangs. If you go to Delhi, the amount of particulate aerosol loading in the atmosphere, you can't breathe. In Beijing, you can't breathe, right? Because of this aerosol loading. And there again, that is the second thing that they've not been able to quantify, because there are so many particulate matters that we emit as a result of that. Now, my board, which was a cynic, and my shareholders who were not very, are now clear that this is scientific evidence. Published, this data has been published in the most famous scientific journals. This is now informing policymakers and others that follow science-based evidence in determining your policy on sustainability. The other lens that we use is the developmental challenges, and we have 6 of them. One is food security. 800 million people go to bed hungry every day. We are most concerned about it because about 60% of these are smallholder farmers. So of the 800 million people, 60% are smallholder farmers who go to bed hungry every day. So that is a problem of undernutrition or malnutrition. But the bigger problem in food security, which is not much spoken about, is the overnutrition, people who are being overfed and undernourished. We have 1.9 billion people who are obese in this world. And the Chicago Council of Business Affairs has said that by 2025, global economies will be spending $35 trillion to manage the non-communicable and chronic diseases resulting from people being overweight and obese. 35% of the children in Indonesia in the rural areas are growing stunted. Many of them are wasted. It's the same statistic in Nigeria. These can be fixed with better nutrition and even through policy, but is today a major problem. And China used to consume 15 kgs of meat per capita in the mid-80s. Now they consume 55 kgs of meat per capita. To produce 1 kg of poultry meat, I need 2 kgs of feed grains. To produce 1 kg of pork meat, I need 4 kgs of feed grains. And to produce 1 kg of beef meat, I need 8 kgs of feed grains. The US consumes 110 kgs of meat per capita. Europe, it's 120. New Zealand, Australia is 130 kgs. So we said in the past, Chinese will never consume as much meat as Westerners do. But Taiwan and Hong Kong, which are greater parts of China, are already consuming 100 kgs of meat per capita. It's all about economics. If you can afford it, you want to eat better quality food. So China today consumes 50% of all the pork meat that is produced in the world, 40% of all the eggs that is produced in the world, 20% of all the beef that is produced in the world. And I can go on and go on. A third of all the rice that is produced, a quarter of all the soybeans that is produced. I don't see China and India having any hope in hell of being able to feed themselves in 20 years' time. They will be massive net importers of food. And imagine the geopolitical tensions that that can cause. Water security, I've already explained. Energy security, we have to double energy production. And if you're going to be, today, 85% of all the energy that we use is fossil fuel driven. If you want to decarbonize the world economy, that has to dramatically change, which means renewables will have to come up. But if you have to double energy production, what we have achieved during the entire course of mankind in terms of energy production, we have to double it. That is going to cause havoc in terms of global atmosphere. We talked about climate change, and this is the whole business of natural capital. So in the global financial crisis in 2008-9, the estimate is that we lost about $3 trillion of financial capital in that crisis. And TEEB is a research outfit that established that every year we are losing between $2.5 and $3 trillion of natural capital, which is benefits that we derive from nature to do and sustain our lives, for which, because of Mother Nature's back office not being set up, it is not issuing us those invoices, right? If carbon is being taxed in Singapore, and we do shadow carbon pricing in Olam, almost a third of the profits that I generated last year, I should have paid back to society for all of the benefits that I used from society to produce the goods and services that I sold, for which I got a free pass because no invoices were issued to me. And that will also change because now there's a natural capital accounting protocol. My view is that in 5 years' time, this will be mandatory, that you have to transparently disclose all of the consumption of all the benefits from nature and ecosystem services that you use. And finally, it's about inclusive growth. Oxfam every year comes up with this report. This year they came up with the report that 60 people in the world have as much wealth as the bottom 3.7 billion people combined. Our global economies have grown 22-fold in the last 116 years, 22-fold. But Gini coefficients and inequality has increased in every country, developed and developing countries. It's not a developing country problem. It is both a developed world problem, and that is why you saw the election victory of Trump and the Brexit and all that are evidences of this growing inequality despite massive growth and all the benefits that globalization brought to us. The third framework and lens that we use is UN Sustainable Development Goals. And this, as I said, is a miracle. And I want anybody in this room to stand up and tell me this is not something that you would like to see. I don't know of anybody who has told me that this is not something that they want to see. But the problem is the multilateral agencies, UN, et cetera, are basically saying, don't cherry pick this, right? You must, as part of your sustainability policy, say that you're going to achieve all of this. I said, no. I said, I don't want to be just politically correct. My company has certain capabilities, assets, and based on that configuration of capabilities and assets, I know that I can impact these 4 goals really directly. I can impact these 4 goals indirectly. I believe all of these 17 goals are hugely important. But my company is not the right company to impact all of this. But there are billions of companies around the world. I don't know whether it's billions or millions, hundreds of millions of companies around the world. Everybody can impact some of these goals. The whole global economy can be organized into 52 sectors. Each sector will have certain particular capability of impacting some of these goals differentially or better. So I'm saying if companies come up with a plan and sectors come up with a plan, you can then quickly map and say that of these 17 goals, which of these goals are going to be unattended? Because no sector is picking it up or no company is interested in it, right? So what we have done is we have said that these are the 4 goals that we can directly impact. And we have specific targets for reducing poverty and in terms of making sure that we can achieve the goal of zero hunger by 2030, acting specifically on climate change, mitigations, and how do we create what Srivan was mentioning about private-public, plural society partnerships. PPPP, 4 Ps rather than 3 Ps, partnerships. And that is goal number 17. And these are the 4 that we are going to be including next year as things that we can directly do. Gender equality. Most of the smallholder farmers that we deal with are women farmers, and thank God for that, right? And we have to make sure that they have, we can take measures in the programs that we run with them that make sure that gender equality is achieved in the toughest frontier markets that we're talking about, not in the developed countries. And the final lens that we use is really embedding this in our business model. And that is what we call the OLAM way. And our business model is got various elements. And the first is to set a direction for the company, and purpose is in the top of this direction. Because we think that there are 3 ways we can engage and motivate and inspire people. And there's a difference between having satisfied employees, having engaged employees, and having inspired employees. If you have satisfied employees, your productivity grows by 20%, according to studies that one has cited. If you have moved people from being satisfied to engaged, your productivity goes up by 70%. If you can get people really inspired to be able to walk on the balls of the feet, they're coming because of purpose and meaning in the work that they're doing, productivity increases by 125%. So for us, one way we want to get inspired employees in the company is to give them true purpose and meaning. And that is why this business of having that purpose is extremely important. The rest of the 4 elements are all about where to play and how to win, then who we are and how do we. And the second way we can motivate our people to become inspired is to give them autonomy and get them to be in self-directed teams. So everybody, we have 47 business units. Each business unit head, we tell them, we are loaning you the dairy business, or we are loaning you the almond business, or the walnut business, or the pistachio business, right? So you have to now do what it takes to make this an enduring business, a sustainable business. And by giving them that autonomy and getting them to be in self-directed teams, we get more engagement and commitment from them. And finally, we have to give them opportunities to master the skill. They have to say at the end of the year, we become a better trader, better risk manager, better plant manager, factory manager, farm manager, whatever it is that they're doing, because of the opportunities that they got in the company, the experiences that they got in the company that allowed them to master the skill. So when we talk about embedding sustainability, it's about embedding purpose, and it has to answer 2 sets of questions. Your purpose has to answer the question, why do you come to work every day? What are you on fire about? What is a big intractable problem that you're trying to solve? What is your cause? And the second set of questions it has to answer is, how do you conduct your business? Winning is important, but how you win is also equally important. So for us, when we developed our purpose, the background was we recognized that in the next 33 years, we have to double food production, which means what we have achieved as mankind through the entire course of our history, in the next 33 years, we have to double it. That is a challenging task in itself. But it's become even more challenging because we have to do it within those planetary boundary conditions. So we have to grow food production, having our hands and feet and everything tied up, because you have to be within those planetary boundary conditions. So it's an enormous challenge. Now, that is the big intractable problem that we want to solve, help solve as a company. Can't solve it on our own. Help solve as a company. That is what our people are now on fire about. That is why they're coming to work every day. And that is our cause. So I talked to you about satisfied employees and engaged employees and inspired employees and the increase in productivity. And that's what we want to be. So we have done the first 2 very well, having satisfied employees, engaged employees. We want them to now really be truly inspired, because they're going to change the world. So we must inspire our employees to invest their energy in the company's success, and this is therefore what we have defined as our purpose. Reimagine global agriculture. It might sound a very trite, hackneyed phrase, but it's a bold declaration of what we intend to achieve. And we want to do that by growing responsibly. So what do we mean by reimagining global agriculture? It answers the first set of questions: what are we on fire about and what is our cost? And we mean three things by that. And how do we conduct our business growing responsibly? And what do we mean by that? First, we want to catalyze rural livelihoods. We have 4.33 million farmers in our network. We want to increase their incomes by increasing their productivity, by providing them agronomic and extension advice to improve their productivity, providing them microfinance, giving them market access, allowing them to produce a higher quality food, certified, organic, traceable, that gives them higher realizations. So we want to transform rural livelihoods. Second, we want to do more with less. More food produced with less resources. So for example, in our onion farming and dehydration operations in California, we have 5 factories there. We have bred an onion seed variety over the last 10 years, which has got higher solid content, 27% solids. Before we started 10 years ago, the solid content in onions was about 13%. We have doubled it, which means we have saved 65 million cubic meters of water to produce the same number of onions. We have reduced land under cultivation by 7,500 hectares. And we have saved $90 million for the company. Yeah? So that is an example of how we want to do more with less in terms of, so every 47 commodities that I supply, I know how much carbon dioxide I'm emitting if I supply a ton of cocoa versus coffee versus cotton versus almonds versus cashews. And we are giving public targets that we will reduce that carbon footprint by a certain percentage in different time frames. And we report through GRI and Carbon Disclosure Project what we are achieving and how far ahead or how far behind we are on those targets. And finally, it is achieving the meta-system changes, the grand challenges, by collaborating and having coalitions with the rest of the sector to make a deep, meaningful impact. On our own, we can't do that. But as a combined sector, we can potentially do that. So I won't go through all of the details of how these three make sense for us. We've talked about this. So I want to just come back to this debate of purpose and value. Olam is a profit-driven, value-driven organization till a few years ago, right? We thought that was our calling. Now we have realized that no, that is not, for all the reasons that I explained. So we want to also be purpose-driven. But the debate is not about one or the other. The debate is about how do you achieve a balance. And today we feel that we can achieve both concurrently, and that is our goal. So if you see our annual report this year, the theme has been maximizing profits and purpose, or maximizing value and purpose. So we want to be profit maximizers and value maximizers at the same time. Okay, so are they in conflict or are they aligned? So this was a big contestable point in our board. And we have demonstrated that if our governing objective is to maximize long-term value, as I said, we had to do these three things: open up capital spread, increase the rate of profitable growth, and sustain that growth. So if I take my edible nuts business this year, they generated $7 million additional bottom line by providing sustainable products to their customers. You know Kind Bar, which is a very successful US company making these health bars. We are a big supplier to them. And the reason that they're giving us such a pricing premium is because we are offering traceable, certifiable, organic raw materials to them. We have increased our bottom line by $7 million. In 3 years, we will increase our bottom line by $21 million for just edible nuts business alone. So we get higher pricing power with the customers, greater customer stickiness, and greater share of wallet, which allows us to open up our capital spreads. We can go faster because we are differentiated, and we can sustain that growth because we have customer stickiness and loyalty with us, and that will impact all of those value drivers. So I promised you that I'll talk about the attack on us by Mighty Earth. So Mighty Earth accused us of deforesting in Gabon. Now, there are a couple of things that we are very clear about. There are many kinds of NGOs, and there are ideologically intransigent NGOs who have a cause. I respect their cause. I respect their cause. But I don't necessarily need to agree with that cause, right? So Mighty Earth basically believes not one stick, one tree can be cut down. Now, Gabon has 90% of its land area forested. And out of that, some of that land area has been, over years, given as forest concessions and have been degraded forests. The government of Gabon has 36% of its people living below the poverty line. It has 38% unemployment. It has 47% youth unemployment. Its economy is dependent entirely on oil and gas. And their research has shown that their reserves will last for another 30 years. So they have a 30-year window to broad base and diversify their economy. So they want, as part of that broad basing and diversification of the economy, one of their pillars, economic pillars, is to develop sustainable agriculture, because it can also address their unemployment problem. And it can also address the rural-urban migration issues that they're suffering from, right? So they want sustainable agriculture, but only in the degraded land area. They have a national land use plan saying that not more than 1% of the land in the next 10 years will be converted into agriculture. And when they have a national land use plan that is consistent with landscape principles, we go and decide to invest. But when we decide to invest, we have to be absolutely clear that we are doing the right thing. So what are we saying? We will not develop plantations in high HCV areas, high conservancy value areas. So in the plantation in question, we were given 100,000 acres of concession, hectares. We planted in 45, we set aside 55, 55% set aside. So the SCS Plus study group that visited the plantation said that we will generate 4.2 million tons of carbon dioxide credits. So it is actually carbon positive because of this set aside. In Indonesia and Malaysia, that set aside is 3%. We are at 55%. Secondly, we will not develop plantations in high carbon stock areas. We will not develop plantations in peat areas. Zero burning policy. We will not have any kind of burning to clear the land, right? We will only develop in secondary degraded forest land that has already been degraded. And when you do HCV assessment, it's not our assessment. We do LIDAR mapping, 1 square meter resolutions, inventory transects of every toad, tick, fauna, flora that is in that square meter, right? And whatever is high conservancy value, we will corridor it off, we will create the buffer zones, and we'll maintain it at our cost to maintain the biodiversity and everything else that is there in that. So the HCS Plus study group that visited it said that this is the most sustainable palm oil plantation anywhere in the world. Yeah, they said anywhere in the world this is so we have to front up. We have to go and face. So my colleagues in my board told me don't engage them because they're not going to be swayed or change. But the problem for me was they were writing to my 22,000 customers, my 400 institutional investors, my 4,000 other investors, and every day I have to answer questions to these guys, you know, what is happening? And it was distracting. So I said we should engage with them. We may not be able to convert them. So when I met up with Congressman Waxman, we had a 4.5-hour meeting. It was scheduled for 90 minutes. And I said, none of your team have visited Gabon, not set foot on in Gabon, right? And you wrote a 70-page report. How did you have the confidence of writing the 70-page report without visiting Gabon? You put a map there, which is not even our plantation, which is one of our competitors' plantation. And you put that map there because you said that sitting here, because of satellite imaging and mapping, we can map. Yes, you map, but you mapped the wrong plantation. And then I said, why are you focused on Gabon if these are Gabon government's priorities? In the US, the natural capital depletion last year by the ag sector in the US was $280 billion. Why wouldn't you focus on your own backyard to sort out something that is more egregious than a poor country? We're not saying average down standards there. We're saying Gabon should have the same standards as anywhere else in the world. But they have a right to balance conservancy with sustainable agricultural development and everything else. And you do not have the right to take that away from them. So now they've agreed. Next month, they're visiting Gabon for the first time. They will meet all the stakeholders there, discuss, understand. And so that's how that has worked. So I'm not saying that, and their cost, they can only survive as an NGO if they get more people to sign no deforestation pledge. So if they can't, they won't. So they said, all your competitors are willing to sign. I said, we cannot sign anything we won't be able to stick to. We are planting in deforested, degraded land, and that will not allow me to sign a no deforestation pledge. But I'll sign a no HCS pledge. I will sign a no HCV pledge. I will sign a no burning pledge. I'll sign a no peat pledge. I will sign a no exploitation pledge. I will sign a most robust, free, prior informed consent pledge. But I will not sign a no deforestation pledge because that is not strictly accurate or true. So we cannot be blackmailed But if you don't do the right thing, then the rest of the stuff is all PR, which is not going to get you anywhere. You have to do the right thing. After you do the right thing, you have to hold your ground. Okay. All right, so I'll end with this last slide, which is, if we want to change the world, 4 changes have to happen. Individually, we have to change. Once I became more aware and appreciative of what sustainability is, I have stopped brushing my teeth with my tap being left open, which I used to do, or shave with my tap left open. We cannot change the world if we don't be the change ourselves that we want to see. So each of us in this room will have to first change individually. Then our companies will have to change. So we have to change at the firm level. All that I talked about in terms of what we're trying to do is to change at the firm level. That is not enough. We have to get whole sectors to change to tackle the grand challenges. So how do you bring the whole sector together? Our industry is hyper competitive. We hate each other's guts. We don't trust each other. We will never come together on anything, right? If we can hurt a competition, we will do that with great glee. So how do we bring people together for a common cause that can transcend the hyper competitiveness of the industry? And that's why we launched the Global Agribusiness Alliance. 45 global agri companies have signed up to be part of that alliance. There are many issues to tackle, but we have created that alliance, and we hope that that will meet that objectives. And then finally, all this can happen still. We can beat our chest 50 years down the road. We'll be sitting in this room and lamenting why we didn't do more to change the course of history. And we will reach that situation if policy does not follow suit. If more governments like Singapore do not impose a carbon tax and carbon is free, we will continue to emit in an unbridled way. So policy has to follow suit. Policy has to say that every company has to disclose its footprint, water, carbon, waste, everybody, so that we can compare all companies. So I think that has to happen as well. When all these 4 things happen, I think we can change the world. And as a company and in my individual capacity, I'm doing what we can and I can in all of these 4 areas, working with various multilateral agencies in this regard. And this is the Global Agribusiness Alliance that was created. And we made it initially a CEO-led alliance because we didn't want them to delegate this to the head of sustainability who will come there, here, but not make any commitment and stick their necks out. The CEO can't hide behind anything. He has to come there and stick his neck out and make that commitment to action. So that's what we have done. We have created these 5 work streams. Sorry, I realize that I've grossly exceeded time. But this presentation is available for those of you who are interested in listening to the rest of the talk as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sunny Verghese. Clearly a sustainability thought leader. It's always heartening to see companies who truly embrace sustainability in their core business strategy, isn't it? We'd like to welcome once again on stage, Mr. Sunny Verghese, Ms. Melissa Kui, as well as Professor Anne Florini up on stage as we move into the panel discussion segment of this forum. Shall we all give them a round of applause? So this morning's dialogue will address how corporate strategy and business can be better aligned with the Sustainable Development Goals, as well as the challenges of implementation. We'll also be discussing the role of corporations in partnership with civil societies and the challenges as well as aspirations for cross-sector collaboration. We're honored to have with us our very eminent panelists, and seated here on stage once again, we've got Mr. Sunny Verghese, Ms. Melissa Kui, Professor Anne Florini. This panel session will be moderated by Mr. Striven Naidu. Mr. Striven, please.
Thank you. I'm going to let Sunny catch a breath and maybe have a drink, and I'll start with the other panelists for a second. Melissa, besides being CEO of NVPC, we've had you at SMU many times. I've heard you talk to our students, and they always come away inspired. So thank you very much. NVPC is a great partner for SMU, and I think for the Master in Trisector collaboration. Welcome. Could you share your thoughts about the role for corporations to partner with civil society groups in Singapore to enhance social and human capital. Is this limited to philanthropy, or how is this evolving, sort of listening to what Sunny had said earlier today?
Great. Well, thank you so much, and it's great to be here, and thank you so much, Sunny, for your illustrious example. Actually, too, it's a great introduction, I think, to thinking about how companies can really exercise not just responsibility for themselves and you in your personal leadership, and I'm so encouraged to hear that. Actually, it's your children that awakened you, because truly, so many times it's the babes, of society that are out there that bring us new ideas. But then also just exercising that leadership more broadly in the sector and even globally with the alliance. So thank you so much. I think when it comes to the question of what is the role and how can companies participate more effectively, more meaningfully in society with groups, I think that the first thing really is to ask, why would you do that? What in fact would the purpose of that be? And I think that the mobilizing and the galvanizing, or the epiphany, in a sense, is that there are things that you cannot do by yourself. There are just things that are beyond that which you can execute within your own realm. So I think the first thing is really to think about companies as identifying what is the intersection then of sort of corporate interests, community interests, national or state, policy level interests and things like that too. I just wanted to share maybe two examples, actually, because I think a lot of times we think of this as being the realm only of large multinationals, organizations and things like that. But then what is the role then of, say, the 99% of businesses in Singapore, which are actually then like small and medium-sized enterprises, as well. And I think that in those contexts too, we often think that, oh, they're too small to make a difference. But I think if we do want to think about moving things in society, we have to think about how to be inclusive of the smaller and medium-sized enterprises actually too. So I wanted to share one example of a local company that identified a purpose that was really solving both a business issue as well as sort of like a social issue. There was one of the winners of our President's Volunteer and Philanthropy Awards last year was a group called Bus Ads. I don't know how many of you guys have heard of the company Bus Ads? Anyone? Okay. Small company. There we go. SME. But fairly young company. But what they've actually done is they paste all the advertising, out there on buses and other transportation kind of vehicles and so forth out there too. Now, what this company was facing was actually labor shortage. Like every other SME in Singapore, screaming, they're like, oh, we don't have enough people to work, all this kind of thing, and they needed people who were very careful. And very attentive to making sure that there were no bubbles, in being able to do this job. So who did they find actually were excellent workers actually for this particular job? They actually found that people with certain types of autism actually were perfectly skilled employees for this purpose. And so what they did was they reached out, they actually reviewed, in fact, even all their business processes. They found out that actually a lot of these autistic youth actually and adults don't like to work in noisy environments. Okay, no problem. We'll bring our buses to you. We'll be able to work in a quiet environment. They were very fast. They were very efficient with what they were doing, and through this collaboration, through this partnership, they were able to find the workers they need who were excellent at doing their job, and were able to actually run their business in a sense more viably too. It created dignity. It created a sense of pride, independence for the youth and the young adults that were participating in this partnership with them too, and it was truly a win-win. So I think going back to that notion that I think the first thing that we need to do is really just identify what is that bigger purpose that is really the coincidence of interests actually too. So I think that's one example of something to think about. want to just maybe share one other example too, which is more along the lines of fostering collaboration, amongst groups. And I'm really happy that Sunny raised his example of the Global Alliance actually too. Here in Singapore, we're also looking at trying to develop some basis for collective impact type of work. How many of you here are actually familiar with collective impact types of models? Anyone? Someone? Ish? Okay. So the idea around that is really how do you bring together different resource stakeholders actually to work on an issue that is bigger than all of us together, to actually tease out the key priorities, the key opportunities, and then create kind of a collaborative approach to actually solving that problem. So, for instance, so we're trying to do that now, in Singapore too, to bring companies together. So what we've done is it's not just companies. It's actually corporate foundations, private foundations, some government-related agencies too, to focus on sticky issues. So in this instance, it's really acknowledging the fact that in Singapore, even in our shiny, beautiful country, there are families and children that are being left behind. And how do you create mobility for this lowest 25% of the socioeconomic cohort? And so CoLabs is bringing, the initiative is called CoLabs, is bringing together different players to go through a process where they would learn about what's working, what's not, who's doing what, what's happening, what are the needs and so forth, to a point where they can then look at prioritizing actually what are the key areas for action and the key opportunities for collaboration, and then go to a point where they could look at actually funding and taking action on a common blueprint. And this is something that has actually failed in the past when efforts were made. And the one thing I think we've learned is that change happens at the speed of trust. So this whole process is really actually a trust-building process. It's not just common learning, it's understanding one another, understanding where, there's a cognitive dimension of it, but there's also a relational and trust dimension of it. So journeying together, learning together, seeing the same elephant is kind of a key part of this process. But then being able to come to a point where in friendship, in relationship, seeing one's comparative sort of resource advantages, and being able to put that together for a solution is something that we're looking to try and map. So I think those are the kinds of ways that you can bring companies to be more stronger contributors beyond just money. There is the skill, there is the network, and then fundamentally there is the integration of corporate responsibility into the business process itself, which I think was a good example that Sunny shared.
Thank you, Melissa. So based on both CoHabs as well as bus ads, it sounds like we need business-driven solutions. Not so much going out there with a solution looking for a problem, but it starts with a business need. But if people put their heads together and sort of creatively reframe approaches, they might find these nice win-wins across sectors.
Yeah, I think that there's the business need, but there's also the social need, and essentially what you're looking at, you're looking at the coincidence, you're looking at the confluence of those two areas.
Thank you. So, Anne, I just wanted to ask you, does the current economic and regulatory environment encourage or even enable corporations to operate in sustainable ways, together with the societies they're embedded in? What changes do you think may be necessary to enable business to be conducted in ways that align with the SDGs?
Yeah. All of the issues that we are addressing today are such big questions that we could spend many, many hours on all of them. So I'm going to try to do that quickly in a way that ties back to what we've heard from both of our speakers today. There's a set of individual skills and understanding that are needed if business is going to transform itself, something that business almost certainly can't do by itself because it doesn't know the problems, it doesn't know what that skill set is. So for a business to go as far on the sustainability journey as Sunny has taken Olam is really extraordinary. And just as a side note, I think quite a few of the MTSE students and alumni were looking at this presentation saying, we just did that in our course, we just did that in our course, over and over again, planetary boundaries, the role of the SDGs, et cetera, et cetera. See, there's a reason we teach you these things. This actually is what is driving the enlightened businesses. So you do need to know about them. So thank you very much for validating what we're doing in the program. So there's a great deal that happens at the individual level, which is why we created the master's program. You have to have a set of skills that make it possible for you to understand these big contexts and to have the skills in which you can create these alliances and bring people together, which are not the skills that are normally taught in a standard business or policy curriculum. That's not enough. That's what we can do in academia. But the point that Sunny ended on the policy side, is extraordinarily important, and we frankly right now have an operating system for the global economy that is based on a set of assumptions about what is valued in the world that is completely out of date. It is an operating system that is based on maximizing returns to financial capital. And that made sense in a world in which financial capital was the constraining element. But it is no longer the constraining element. There's lots of financial capital in the world. We are awash in liquidity. The constraining elements are human, social, and natural capital, which are things that we are actually only starting even to be able to figure out how to measure. We have an operating system that has reporting requirements for financial capital, is just starting to figure out what the metrics and reporting requirements would be for natural capital. As Sunny said, we're working it out. It's not mandatory, and it's not well developed yet. We have a long way to go on that, but we need a different accounting system. We need a different set of companies laws, because right now we have laws that say you register as a for-profit, in which case you are held accountable for this set of things, or you register as a nonprofit, in which case it's okay to try to do good for society. But then how do you make money? What's your financial viability? There's a discussion that's starting to happen around the world now that do we need to come up with a new operating system, one that creates space for the kind of company that Olam has already pushed itself into being, but doesn't have a whole lot of company in doing this. How do you make it easy for business to be purpose-driven? Right now, we make it as hard as possible. And you have to fight a battle with your board, with your stakeholders, with your shareholders, with your whoever is financing your company, and you have to try to prove to them over and over again that you will make lots of money by doing this. Because there is not very much space given to the purpose side of the equation. That's something we can change. We can change the reporting requirements. We can change the company's laws. We can change the legal regulatory structure. There's a bunch of experimentation with that starting to happen around the world, but if we really want to see a transformation such that the kinds of alliances and partnerships that you've both been talking about can really take off, this policy element is absolutely crucial.
Thank you. So because I teach a little bit of corporate law, I realize it's hard to convince people that corporations were never designed to only pursue profit and they had a lot of other stakeholders. It might be better to sort of start from scratch and create a new sort of regime for a fourth sector of purpose-driven income-earning organizations.
Which would take a great deal of time, and in the meantime, we need as much cross-sector collaboration as we can possibly have, because the problems aren't going to wait.
Thank you. Sunny, back to you. I was privileged to read your slides last night, but hearing you today was much better. It reminded me of a quote that many of us at SMU, especially at MTSC, resonate with, from Spanish poet Antonio Machado. Caminante no hay camino. Or in English, traveler, there is no path. He continues by saying, the path is made by walking. It seems like you are blazing a new path, and you've had to create things that never existed before. The Business and Sustainable Development Commission's website states that it's committed to mobilizing a growing community of executives who understand the social and economic benefits of aligning corporate strategy with the SDGs. From your talk, and the fact that you are one of the commissioners, Olam is clearly committed. Could you tell us when this necessity for aligning was first apparent? I think you said maybe 11 years ago. And the steps that you needed to take to convince your board, your senior management team, and your shareholders that this was worth pursuing. And what are some of the challenges you've had to overcome, and especially if you had to do it with partnerships across the sectors.
Yeah, the 11 years and the 12 years, the speech at the UN was 1 year ago, so now it's 12 years. Yeah, so I think the time frame is quite explicit, but we were fortunate. We were the subject of a vicious short-selling attack in 2012 when we were beginning to invest in long gestating assets. And that meant that our returns collapsed. Before we embarked on that path, we tried to educate all our investors that the future for Olam would be moving from a very asset-light model to a more asset-intense model and a more selectively integrated model in the value chain. And our shareholders at that point in time, on an average, we had about 480 institutional shareholders. We had about 6,000 retail shareholders. And they owned about 56% of the company's stock. And their average holding period was 5 months at a time. So when we were making investments, when we invested in the rubber plantation, we said we're going to be investing $285 million in the rubber plantation. It'll take 11 years to cash flow break even, and we will start seeing money from the 12th year onwards. So these guys got very irritated and angry and called me up and said, what is getting into your head to make such distant return commitments? I'm not going to be a shareholder in 5 months' time, let alone 12 years' time. So I said, we're not managing this business from the vantage point of view of a temporary, transient, fleeting, exiting shareholder of our business. We are managing this business from the vantage point of somebody who's going to own this business forever, and that long-term continuing owner, what is in his best interest in terms of the decisions he should take. So we get the politicians we deserve. We also get the shareholders we deserve. So I told my investor relations team, your job is to go and actually demarket the company to all of these investors that we have, and actually go and frighten the living daylights out of them, saying that if you invest in Olam, you're going to be really disappointed, right? They said, but that's not our training. We have been trained to find new investors for you, new prospects for you. So why are you telling us to go and do the opposite of what we have been trained to do? So I said, I'm not interested in 1 million shareholders. I'm interested in 10 or 12 shareholders. But they should believe in the long-term prospects for the agricultural sector. They should be convinced that we have a winning strategy. They should believe that we have the capacity to execute the strategy. They should believe in the integrity of the management team. And most importantly, they should have at least a 7-8 year investment horizon. So my investor relations team told me that you're asking for something that doesn't exist, right? That kind of long-term institutional shareholder is gone out of the window. So we worked very hard in realigning our shareholder base. With Temasek leading it, and in concert with management and the family sponsor, we made a voluntary general offer for the company. And Temasek went from 14-15% to 52%. Then we brought in Mitsubishi, who became a 20% shareholder. Temasek thinks in 10 and 20-year terms. Mitsubishi thinks in 100-year terms. So the first objective was to realign our shareholder base from short-term, temporary, transient shareholders to more long-term shareholders that is more consistent with our strategy of building value long-term. And the problem also is I'm definitely not going to be a CEO 12 years from now. I'm already 57, right? So what incentive do I have to make a long-term commitment which is going to pay off in 12 years' time? And in the next 4 or 5 years that I'm going to be the CEO, my profits are going to be down and my returns are going to collapse. So if you don't have our leaders develop a stewardship and trusteeship mentality, then we're not going to be making the right decisions long-term in the best interests of all stakeholders. So for me, I think realizing that, changing the shareholder base, realigning it, and then being able to go and talk to Temasek or being able to talk to Mitsubishi, for whom sustainability is now very important. And everybody is on this journey, right? They were not, having the same sensibilities and consciousness some time ago, Temasek, for example. But today, they are at the forefront of wanting to build sustainable businesses. Mitsubishi has always been that. So we got the right kind of shareholders who believe that this is the enduring long-term way of building sustained value. And that is therefore helping Olam in doing this. Because if your shareholders are not aligned and your board is not aligned, then the leadership team has no chance of making that work.
Thank you very much. It was really interesting to hear about how you changed the shareholder composition you had, first by trying to find new shareholders and also trying to change the mindsets of your existing shareholders. Before we quickly turn to Q&A, just one quick round of responses from you. Could you tell us what is the greatest challenge you foresee for cross-sector collaboration, and what's your greatest aspiration for how cross-sector collaboration may turn out? Who would like to start?
Oh, that would be such a long list. So the greatest one, I think I want to pick up on Melissa's wonderful phrase, change happens at the speed of trust. We have a world in which trust seems to be rapidly, rapidly declining. Figuring out how to reverse that, which at a mass scale, not just at a retail scale, I think is the biggest challenge we face.
I would say that the biggest challenge really is that we awaken a moral imagination. You know, I think a lot of times we're just limited by what we can imagine, what we think is possible. And I think the sort of moral courage, in a sense, to step up, to do the unpopular, you know, to do the thing that may get some censure or short-term flack, I think is the other big part of it. So what do I hope for? Actually, I believe and hope for more leaders with that kind of moral courage and imagination.
Yeah, our experience was that the first reaction was, why is Olam, which is amongst the tiniest of all the global agri majors, taking this initiative of trying to get a sectoral-wide alliance going? And they were suspicious of that. They were upset that they have had this 200-year pedigree and they haven't, you know, done this, and Olam did it. So I thought very long and hard about it, and I said that as part of commemorating our 25th anniversary, rather than spend money on a big party, let's do something that can have some lasting value. And this was one of the 4 initiatives that we said we will invest in providing the thought leadership, spending the money that is required to get this alliance going. And I said that I don't need to be the chair of this alliance or anything else. Any one of you could be the chair of this alliance, but somebody had to get the ball rolling. So the first issue is of suspicion of, are you trying to gain a competitive advantage over all of us? Are you trying to steal the thunder in terms of, you know, the plaudits and the credit for taking this initiative? So those are the big things that we had to contend with. And then there is a lot of people who have got initiative fatigue. Just in our sector, for example, the retailers, including Walmart and others, have set up an alliance to look at preventing food waste at the retail shelf, because 40% of the food that we produce is wasted from harvest to customer. And in the developed world, 40% is wasted at the plate. So there's food waste both ways. So they have formed an alliance. Then the Consumer Goods Forum, which consists of all the packaged food multinationals, they have set up a forum called Sustainable Agricultural Initiative. And then the Stockholm Eat Foundation has set up a forum on nutrition, focused on nutrition. So people are saying there's so many of these initiatives coming up. Yet another initiative, why do we need a global agribusiness alliance? Can't we just be part of one of these membership groups? So all of these value chain focused, broad-based collaborations have come up to address different pieces of the problem. I would envision that in 5 years' time, all of this will coalesce into an end-to-end alliance, trying to solve this meta system of food and agriculture. And we all have to work towards getting there. But in the meanwhile, it is okay for half a dozen initiatives along the value chain to focus on different pieces to get that breakthroughs in terms of solutions and innovations that are required to tackle these tough challenges.
Thank you.